The Minnesota Vikings have decided not to play most of their starters in their second preseason game against the Cleveland Browns, which includes, of course, Justin Jefferson, and it also includes Minnesota Vikings starting quarterback Sam Darnold. Now, they just participated in practice with the Cleveland Browns in joint practices, so how much more do you need to see Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings starters going against the Cleveland Browns starters? This was practically a week where they played preseason games, got preseason reps during practice against the Cleveland Browns. But ultimately, we all know why Sam Darnold is not playing for the Minnesota Vikings in preseason game number 2. He only played one series in preseason game number 1, but the reason why he's not playing in preseason game number 2 is because the Minnesota Vikings do not want to go through what they went through last year, where they were interchanging quarterbacks in the second half of the season almost every single game. When Kirk Cousins got hurt, they went from Jaron Hall to Josh Dobbs to Nick Mullins, back to some other guy, up to some other. They don't want to go through that revolving door of quarterbacks again. So they are going to rest their main starters for preseason game number 2 and preseason game number 3. Sam Darnold was always going to start the season, but there was always some insurance because if he got hurt, he just sub in J.J. McCarthy and the offense is probably just fine. Now, if Sam Darnold gets hurt, the season is over. And Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings offense experienced that last year after Kirk Cousins went down against the Green Bay Packers. So they are doing everything in their power to keep their QB1 safe and healthy for week 1 against the New York Giants. Because what's going to happen if Sam Darnold goes down? You probably look into free agency, you look into guys getting cut, you look at the market, and you try to bring in a quarterback or you trade for a quarterback, and he's going to be nowhere near the talent that Sam Darnold is. So basically, the Minnesota Vikings are protecting their assets, protecting their future, because J.J. McCarthy got injured in preseason game number 1. I'm sure, knowing the things that they know now, J.J. McCarthy wouldn't have even played in preseason game number 1 because they value practice reps, joint practice reps, practices throughout the regular season, and the possibility of J.J. McCarthy making his debut for the Minnesota Vikings this season instead of repairing or, doing therapy, doing physical therapy on his knee that needed a meniscus repair. So basically, that makes this game unwatchable, and the Minnesota Vikings play the Cleveland Browns in preseason game number 2, but who really cares? This was the right decision. This was the only decision that makes sense, and Sam Darnold staying safe and healthy, being ready to play week 1 without any dinged up injuries or whatnot, is the most important thing for the Minnesota Vikings offense right now. Obviously, JJ's not going to play. That is Justin Jefferson in any preseason game. So hopefully he stays healthy throughout practices and stuff like that. But Sam Darnold needs to be healthy for the Minnesota Vikings to have any chance of being a successful team this year. The hope and record of the Minnesota Vikings this season isn't going to depend on Justin Jefferson and how well he performs, Jordan Addison, the Minnesota Vikings defense. It all depends on how Sam Darnold can perform as QB1. Can he resurrect his career with the Minnesota Vikings? I believe he can. I believe he'll show inconsistencies at times throughout the season. He'll have weeks where he looks like a guy that should deserve a contract extension. And then he'll have weeks where he looks like a guy that should, be a third string quarterback somewhere else in the NFL. But The Minnesota Vikings resting their starters in preseason game number 2, the only decision that makes sense if you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, if you're a Minnesota Vikings owner, and if you're a Minnesota Vikings coach.